Hello my friends, welcome back to Mindset English today. I want to share with you the incredible story of Cleopatra, the last queen of ancient Egypt. This is not just a history lesson, it's a time-traveling adventure filled with drama, power, love, and ambition. Cleopatra was one of the most fascinating women in history, and her life reads like a movie. So sit back, relax, and enjoy this exciting story. Perfect for practicing your English listening and learning something amazing at the same time. More than 2,000 years ago, in 69 BCE, a baby girl was born in the beautiful city of Alexandria, Egypt. Her name was Cleopatra, and she would one day become one of the most powerful and unforgettable queens the world has ever known. But before she wore a crown and ruled a kingdom, Cleopatra was simply a young girl with big dreams and a sharp mind. Cleopatra came from a royal family called the Ptolemaic dynasty. This family had ruled Egypt for many generations, but they were not originally Egyptian. They were actually Greek, and their family line began when Alexander the Great's general Ptolemy I became king of Egypt after Alexander's death. This meant that Cleopatra was both Greek and Egyptian by culture. She was part of two great worlds. Her father was King Ptolemy XII, and although we are not completely sure who her mother was, many historians believe it was Cleopatra. Cleopatra was born into luxury. She lived in a grand palace, wore beautiful clothes made of the finest materials, and had many servants. She had everything a young girl could dream of except peace and safety. Even though she was a princess, her life was not easy. Growing up in a royal family during those times was very dangerous. Family members often fought each other for power. Brothers and sisters, even parents and children, became enemies. Some were poisoned, others were exiled, and some even killed. Cleopatra grew up knowing that even in her own home, she could not always trust those around her. But Cleopatra was different from many others. She believed that knowledge was power. In a time when most women were not allowed to study, Cleopatra learned as much as she could. She was determined to be more than just a queen who sat on a throne. She wanted to be wise, strong, and respected. She studied many subjects: math, science, history, literature, and especially politics. She knew that if she wanted to rule Egypt one day, she needed to understand how the world worked. She also became a master of languages. Cleopatra could speak Greek, Latin, Egyptian, Hebrew, and several others. Some say she spoke up to 9 languages fluently. This made her not only very smart but also very unique. She was the first Ptolemaic ruler to learn the Egyptian language, something none of her ancestors had done. Cleopatra was also known for her charm. She had a warm, powerful voice, and people who met her often said they felt drawn to her. She was not just beautiful, she had a special energy that made people want to follow her. But even though she had great intelligence and charm, her early years were filled with struggle. Her father, King Ptolemy XII, was not a strong leader. Many Egyptians did not respect him because they believed he was weak and gave too much power to Rome. At one point, he was forced to leave Egypt and live in exile. Cleopatra and her family had to flee with him. During these hard times, Cleopatra learned a very important lesson. Being a ruler was not just about sitting on a throne. It meant facing enemies, making hard decisions, and always being ready for change. When Cleopatra was around 14 years old, her life began to change even more. Her mother disappeared. Some say she died, others think she was murdered. Then Cleopatra's father became very ill. She was still just a teenager, but she knew that she had to be ready. The time was coming when she would have to step into a very big role. What made Cleopatra special was her deep love for Egypt. Even though she came from a Greek family, she respected the traditions, religion, and people of Egypt. She dressed like an Egyptian queen and even presented herself as the goddess Isis, one of the most powerful goddesses in Egyptian mythology. Many Egyptians loved her for this, and they saw her not just as a ruler, but as a symbol of their own identity and pride. By the time she was a young woman, Cleopatra was ready to lead. But the road to becoming queen would be anything but easy. She had enemies inside her own family and outside the palace. She would need all her courage, intelligence, and determination to survive and succeed. When Cleopatra was 18 years old, her father, King Ptolemy XII, passed away. In his will, he made a surprising decision. He said that Cleopatra should become queen, but she would not rule alone. She had to share the throne with her 10-year-old brother, Ptolemy XIII. Yes, in ancient Egypt, it was common for royal siblings, even brothers and sisters, to rule together. Sometimes, they even married to keep the royal bloodline pure. But Cleopatra had no desire to share power with a young child. She had studied politics, history, and leadership. She knew she was ready, and she believed she could guide Egypt far better than her brother, who was still just a boy. At first, Cleopatra tried to work with him, hoping they could rule together peacefully. But very soon, things began to go wrong. The royal advisors who supported her brother did not like Cleopatra. They did not want a strong, intelligent woman in power. They found her too independent and too smart to control. These advisors began to plot against her. They wanted Ptolemy XIII to have all the power so that they could make decisions for him behind the scenes. They pushed Cleopatra out of the palace and out of power. Suddenly, Cleopatra was in danger. She was forced to flee from the royal palace, escaping into the desert with only a few loyal followers. Imagine that, the Queen of Egypt, walking through the burning sands, with no throne, no army, and no home. But Cleopatra was not the kind of woman who gave up. Even in exile, she began to plan her return. At the same time, far away in Rome, one of the most powerful generals in history had just arrived in Egypt, Julius Caesar. Caesar was known all over the world. He was not only a great military leader, but also a smart politician. He had come to Egypt to settle a conflict, but he didn't know that he would soon meet one of the most remarkable women of all time. Cleopatra knew that this was her chance. She had to meet Caesar, and she had to do it in a way he would never forget. She couldn't just walk into the palace, because her enemies would stop her. So, she came up with a bold and unforgettable plan. One night, Cleopatra had her loyal servant wrap her in a large carpet, yes, an actual rolled-up carpet. Then, the servant carried the carpet into Caesar's private quarters and presented it as a gift. When Caesar unrolled the carpet, he was shocked. There, in front of him, was Cleopatra, young, beautiful, confident, and brilliant. She spoke to him with charm and honesty. She told him about her love for Egypt, her dreams of becoming a great queen, and how her brother and his advisors had stolen her throne. Caesar was impressed. He saw that Cleopatra was not only beautiful but also courageous, clever, and full of passion. Caesar agreed to help her regain her throne. Together they made a powerful team. Cleopatra brought her knowledge of Egypt, and Caesar brought his Roman army. Soon, war broke out between Cleopatra and her brother's forces. It was a fierce and bloody conflict, but in the end, Cleopatra and Caesar were victorious. Ptolemy XIII was defeated and later drowned in the Nile River while trying to escape. Cleopatra was once again the Queen of Egypt, but this time, she was stronger, wiser, and more determined than ever before. She began to rebuild her country. With Caesar's support, she introduced new laws, encouraged trade, and worked to improve life for her people. She wanted Egypt to be powerful and respected, not just a place of pyramids and deserts, but a modern and proud nation. During this time, Cleopatra and Caesar became very close. They spent many months together in Alexandria, enjoying each other's company and discussing their plans for the future. Caesar was around 52 years old, and Cleopatra was only 21, but their connection was strong. Cleopatra admired Caesar's strength and leadership, and Caesar admired Cleopatra's intelligence and charm. They traveled together along the Nile River, visited temples, and studied the rich culture and history of Egypt. Caesar began to understand why Cleopatra loved her country so much. He saw that Egypt was more than just a faraway land. It was a place full of beauty, knowledge, and opportunity. In 47 BCE, Cleopatra gave birth to a son. She named him Ptolemy Caesar, but people called him Caesarion, which means Little Caesar. Cleopatra believed that their son would one day rule both Egypt and Rome, uniting two of the greatest powers in the world. But the world outside Egypt was still full of danger. Not everyone in Rome was happy about Caesar's relationship with Cleopatra. Many Roman leaders were jealous and afraid. They worried that Caesar would give too much power to Egypt, or that Cleopatra would try to take control of Rome through him. Still, Cleopatra was not afraid. She continued to rule her country with strength and pride. She believed that her love for Caesar, her leadership skills, and her dreams for Egypt would lead her to greatness. And so, Cleopatra's incredible journey had only just begun. Cleopatra believed that Caesarion would one day unite Egypt and Rome, creating a powerful empire that would bring peace and prosperity to both nations. She hoped that her son would be the symbol of strength and unity, a living bridge between two great civilizations. Cleopatra dreamed of a future where Egypt would not be threatened by Rome, but would walk beside it as an equal. However, this dream was not easy to achieve. Cleopatra and Caesar's relationship brought as much trouble as it did hope. Many powerful people in Rome disapproved of Caesar's close ties to the Egyptian queen. To them, Cleopatra was not just a foreigner, she was a threat. Whispers spread through the Roman Senate. Some called her a temptress, a woman who used her beauty and charm to manipulate Caesar. Others feared she wanted to rule Rome through him. The idea of a non-Roman woman having such influence over their most powerful leader was simply unacceptable. To them, despite the growing tension, Caesar invited Cleopatra to Rome. Always fearless, Cleopatra agreed. She traveled with Caesarion and her royal entourage, determined to show Rome the greatness of Egypt. Her arrival was unlike anything the Romans had seen before. Cleopatra entered Rome in golden chariots pulled by majestic horses. She brought with her exotic animals, rich fabrics, and servants dressed in elegant Egyptian attire. People gathered in the streets, amazed by the spectacle. In Rome, Cleopatra stayed in a luxurious villa provided by Caesar. She attended banquets, met important Roman officials, and even influenced Roman fashion with her Egyptian style. Cleopatra walked with confidence. Her presence was powerful and unforgettable. Roman women were especially intrigued and sometimes threatened by her glamour and bold personality. She didn't hide in the background. Cleopatra was proud of who she was. While in Rome, Cleopatra watched as Caesar rose to even greater power. He was named dictator for life, meaning he had complete control over the Roman government. Cleopatra hoped that this would strengthen their alliance and secure Egypt's future. But all around them, danger was growing. Many Roman senators were afraid of Caesar's power. They feared he would end the republic and make himself king, and they were also afraid of Cleopatra's influence. In 44 BCE, the unthinkable happened. Julius Caesar was assassinated by a group of senators who believed they were saving Rome from a tyrant. They stabbed him to death in the Senate. The news shocked the world. Cleopatra was devastated. She had lost her greatest ally, the father of her son. Rome became a dangerous place for her. Without Caesar, she had no protection. Enemies whispered that she was partly to blame. Cleopatra quickly gathered her people, her son, and all the treasures she could carry, and fled back to Egypt. Back home, Cleopatra faced her loss with courage. Though she mourned deeply, she did not let sorrow stop her. She knew that Egypt was still in a vulnerable position. Without Caesar, she needed new allies. Cleopatra focused on strengthening her country. She built up her army, improved trade, and made sure her people had food and work. She also focused on raising her son. Cleopatra taught Caesarion about leadership, politics, and responsibility. She dreamed of the day when he would rule as a wise and powerful king. Meanwhile, Rome was once again in chaos. After Caesar's death, a power struggle began between his supporters. The most powerful men were Mark Antony, Caesar's loyal general, Octavian, Caesar's adopted son, and Lepidus, another Roman politician. Together, they formed the second triumvirate to rule Rome. But it was clear from the beginning that they didn't trust each other. Each man wanted more power. Mark Antony was known across the Roman world. He was a brave soldier, a skilled speaker, and a charming leader. When he called on Cleopatra to meet him in the city of Tarsus in modern-day Turkey, Cleopatra saw an opportunity. She knew that if she could win Antony's support, Egypt would be protected. Cleopatra prepared carefully. She would not come as just another queen. She wanted Antony to remember her forever. She sailed to Tarsus on a golden ship, with silver oars and purple sails. She dressed as the goddess Aphrodite, the goddess of love and beauty. Perfume filled the air, music played, and her servants wore costumes that made them look like gods and goddesses. When she arrived, the entire city stopped to watch. Mark Antony was amazed. He had never seen anyone like Cleopatra. She was clever, confident, and beautiful. Their meeting was a success. Cleopatra spoke to Antony with intelligence and humor. He was impressed by her leadership and knowledge. Soon, Antony agreed to visit her in Alexandria. There their connection grew stronger. They spent time enjoying grand banquets, music, and games. Cleopatra showed Antony the richness of Egyptian culture, the temples, the markets, the palaces. Antony fell in love with Cleopatra, and she with him. But their relationship was not just about romance. It was also about power. Antony needed Cleopatra's wealth to fund his military campaigns. Cleopatra needed Antony's protection against Rome. They were a perfect match, both in love and in politics. As time passed, Cleopatra and Antony had 3 children together, a son named Alexander Helios, a daughter named Cleopatra Selene, and another son named Ptolemy Philadelphus. Cleopatra believed that her children would one day rule a great empire stretching from Egypt to Rome. However, their happiness was threatened by Octavian. Octavian was rising in power and saw Cleopatra as a danger. He accused her of trying to control Antony in Rome. He spread rumors saying that Cleopatra had used magic to enchant Antony. He said Antony had turned his back on Rome for the love of a foreign queen. Antony was married to Octavian's sister, Octavia, but he chose to stay with Cleopatra in Egypt. This made Octavian furious. He saw it as a betrayal. The rivalry between Octavian and Antony turned into open conflict. Octavian declared war not just on Antony, but on Cleopatra too. In 31 BCE, a great naval battle took place at Actium, on the western coast of Greece. Cleopatra and Antony joined forces to fight Octavian. They brought a large fleet of ships and were determined to win, but Octavian's forces were better prepared and more disciplined. The battle was long and difficult. During the fight, Cleopatra's ship suddenly turned and sailed away. Some believe she did this to protect her fleet. Others say it was a planned retreat. But Antony, seeing her ship leave, believed she had betrayed him. He was heartbroken and confused. His forces lost their courage, and Octavian's army defeated them. Antony followed Cleopatra back to Egypt. There she explained everything. She had not betrayed him. She had only wanted to protect their future. Antony believed her, and their love remained strong. But Octavian was coming. His army was marching toward Alexandria. Cleopatra and Antony tried to defend their city, but it was no use. They were outnumbered and surrounded. Antony fought one last battle. When he heard the false news that Cleopatra had died, he was overcome with grief. He fell on his sword. As he lay dying, a servant told him the truth: Cleopatra was alive. He was carried to her, and they spent their last moments together. Antony died in Cleopatra's arms. Cleopatra now faced her greatest challenge. Octavian had won. He would soon capture her and parade her through Rome as a prisoner. Cleopatra could not accept this fate. She had always lived as a proud and powerful queen. She would not end her life in chains. In her final hours, Cleopatra dressed in her finest royal robes. She placed her crown on her head. Surrounded by treasures and symbols of her rule, she arranged for a poisonous snake Anas to be brought to her. Calmly and with dignity, she allowed the snake to bite her. Cleopatra chose to die on her own terms. When Octavian arrived, he found Cleopatra dead. She lay peacefully in her royal chamber. Though he had won the war, he had not broken her spirit. Cleopatra had taken control of her destiny until the very end. With Cleopatra's death, Egypt became part of the Roman Empire. Her son Caesarion was captured and executed. Octavian became the first Roman emperor and took the name Augustus. The age of the Egyptian pharaohs came to a close, but Cleopatra's story did not fade away. For thousands of years, people have remembered her as one of the greatest women in history. She was intelligent, fearless, and full of passion. She ruled with wisdom, fought for her people, and loved with all her heart. Cleopatra's life teaches us many lessons. She reminds us that true power comes not just from armies or crowns, but from courage, knowledge, and belief in oneself. She faced betrayal, heartbreak, and war, but she never gave up. She never stopped dreaming. So let Cleopatra's story inspire you. Be bold, be strong, and like Cleopatra, never let fear decide your fate. Let her life remind you that even in the darkest times, you have the power to rise above, to lead, and to leave behind a legacy that will never be forgotten. Thank you for listening to the story of Cleopatra, a queen whose courage and wisdom echo through the ages. If you enjoyed this episode, please like, share, and subscribe to our channel for more amazing stories from history. Your support helps us bring these incredible tales to life for learners and dreamers around the world. Until next time, keep learning, keep exploring, and keep believing in the power of history.